So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Strategies to Support Social Emotional Learning at Home. My name is Mary Beth Harrison Cunningham. I'm the manager here at the Parent Resource Center, and we are very happy to have you with us this morning, and we are so excited for this webinar. I would like to introduce our two presenters today. Jeanne Veraska is a Fairfax County Public Schools school social worker, and Dr. Lisa Phifer is an FCPS school psychologist. And we welcome them this morning, and they have some wonderful strategies to share with you, things that you can take away with you today, and will be able to support your family. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeanne and Lisa.
Good morning, Fairfax County parents. I'm so excited to be with you this morning. We had a nice little bout of pretty snow, and hopefully things will calm down for now. So I'm Lisa Phifer, and I am a FCPS school psychologist in Region 3. This is I had to count back. It's my 15th year practicing as a school psychologist, and I'm also a mom and a wife. I have a third grader who's currently upstairs trying to manage virtual learning. So this topic of social emotional learning is very near and dear to my heart, not only because it's what I do for a living, but it's also what I'm trying to practice these strategies at home. Well, we're all dealing with the ever-changing environment. So I'm excited to do this presentation with you, and I've been working with Jeanne Veraska, and this has been a great collaborative experience. So I'll let Jeanne introduce herself.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, good morning, and I share all the sentiments that Lisa said as well. It's just such a pleasure to be here this morning and share this learning with you, so thank you. And I am Jeanne Veraska, as I said, and a school social worker. I've also helped with the county's social emotional learning at 5 high schools and at the division level, and been very excited about this work. And just like Lisa, I'm also a parent. And so this year especially, we've had a lot of experiences with bringing social and emotional learning into our home as well. So we're excited to be here with you today and share some of what we've experienced. I'm sure you all also can bring some of your experience to the day as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa to get started.
Okay, so and so as we go through this presentation today, we will also have some breakout groups. So there'll be some activities so you can engage and connect with other families. And if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll, if we can in the moment, we may talk about it, or we will come back to all of those questions at the end, so we make sure that you have your answers. So to start today, we're going to talk about, I'm sharing one of my favorite quotes from Fred Rogers, and what he had said was, anything that is human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with this important talk can help us know that we are not alone. So if you would like, put in the chat how this resonates with you. What can you take, or what are your comments on this thought as we open up this presentation? Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Helping kids to express feelings can ease stress, and we have definitely been on this kind of like roller coaster of stress over the last, well, almost a year now, of trying to adapt to new routines, set new boundaries at home, support our kids while supporting ourselves. It also helps to get validation, for sure, because as we'll talk throughout today, our feelings are valid experiences. They are subjective to how we interact to situations. So how I feel about a situation might be different. How Jeanne feels about a situation might be different to other children. So learning to build up the capacity to communicate verbally or nonverbal gestures is so important. Yeah, and talking about it can help kids feel normal, to know they're not the only one, because, with lots of distancing and just, the state of affairs right now, it is easy to have these big feelings, but also feel that maybe you're not alone. So building that connection and support. And also, to be vulnerable, that's a hard thing to do sometimes, but when we have trusted people in our lives, we can make those feelings more mentionable. So awesome responses to start this. Go to the next slide. Okay, so today we're going to reference CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and it's where we kind of focus our social emotional strategies. So just so we have an idea of what we mean when we talk about social emotional learning, we're talking about the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. So that's a lot. But we in Fairfax County have integrated this within our portrait of graduate. Our teachers model these strategies. Our families model these strategies. This just kind of puts a definition to all the work that all of our systems are doing to support and build our children's abilities. And when we have strong emotional learning abilities, we are also able to build on academic success and opening our kids' pathways to connect further with learning and further with their classmates. So the next slide is the core tenets of social emotional learning. And as you can see from the outer rings, social emotional learning occurs in the classrooms, through our teacher-directed lessons, through our small group interactions with peers, in our schools with how we foster positive school climate, connection, be proactive in handling, bullying or, just promoting good core values. And then we have our, one of our most important stakeholders is our families. So making sure we understand their norms and their values and how we can integrate that within our school as a system and our individual schools, because we know Fairfax County is quite diverse. We have families from everywhere, which is quite amazing. So each school has its own culture that is shaped and formed through our families. And then also the community. So we hope we build the kids' skills so that they can also demonstrate these abilities while they're out playing sports and they're able to problem solve, or they're out participating in groups or interacting with their church communities, whatever their community is, that they are able to express those skills. And before we go on, just the 5 key components of social emotional learning. One would be self-awareness. So this is, developing your own personal identity, also being able to identify emotions, and kind of building that self-efficacy that, when I have a problem, I think I can try. Handling a challenge wouldn't be so bad. Self-management is now managing those emotions when it comes to stressful situations. What do my behaviors look like? What are my emotions when it comes to certain situations? This also applies to setting goals and pushing yourself through motivation. Responsible decision making is helping our learners to be curious, to ask questions, to learn from others, to not only make decisions based on their thoughts, but to understand how others might also solve problems, and then to work in a collaborative effort, which would be relationship skills, learning how to resolve conflicts appropriately, learning how to communicate their feelings in those manageable ways. And then social awareness, also tied with relationship skills, but this would be learning skills of gratitude or empathy. So you can see there's multiple components, but we're able to integrate these directly and through our modeling through all layers of classrooms, schools, and communities.
So everything that Lisa is talking about has been research-based, and so what we're bringing to you today is some of the strategies based on the research. And so what we do know is, and you all can see the slide in front of you, but what we do know is that when our children are able to be exposed to all of these things, such as you know, when they're more aware of themselves, when they're more aware of their social surroundings, when they're able to build responsible decision-making skills and things of that nature, then they are able to build the empathy skills that we want them to have. They're able to have better, healthier, more quality relationships. And then as a result, they're going to have the ability to interact better with their community. They're going to be able to achieve better at school. They're going to have more leadership skills. And so all the things that we want for our children, they're going to be able to do with more capacity if it is that we are able to help them build these social and emotional learning skills. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa to give us some basic examples of that, and then we're going to get into some strategies for how to build that.
Yeah, so there are examples of social emotional skills pretty much everywhere you look at home. And usually these are just daily things that might go overlooked, but this is really social emotional learning expressing itself. So when your children follow routines independently, they're showing some self-regulation, that they understand that these routines are important. While they might be reluctant to do those chores, they do pitch in because they understand that roles within the family. When family members feel safe to identify and communicate their feelings appropriately, checking yourself when you're a little frustrated, coming back to the problem, resolving conflicts in a kind of a compassionate manner. Understanding, that a respectful tone when communicating is important, and being honest, and then knowing when to ask for help. Showing that even adults need to ask for help sometimes. Other examples might be showing empathy towards others, or when your child recognizes maybe you're having a stressful day and they do something nice like make you a snack, or ask to help out in some way. Those are also really nice, small things that happen during the day that reflect social emotional skills at work. Okay.
And to build on what Lisa was just sharing, it's also really helpful for your children when you are able to point that out, to say, oh, that was a kind thing to do, or that was a very helpful thing to do, because then it helps them to label it. And so this might seem really basic, but it doesn't matter whether you have a child in your home who is 2 or 18. It's really important that the first strategy that we have is that we're starting to label and give a vocabulary to emotions. We have to know what words to use so that we can communicate appropriately with our emotions. So it's important for us to understand what are emotions. So emotions are very powerful because they motivate our behaviors, and they basically tell us whether we're going to get involved in something or we're not going to get involved in something. And what's really important is that all emotions are valid and all emotions are emotions. So they're not negative or positive, they just are. And it's also really important that we remind ourselves that what is a strong emotion to our child is a strong emotion. We might not experience something as such a strong emotion anymore, but when we were 8, that having our favorite toy completely smashed probably would have had the same strong emotion. Now, if we had seen that same toy smashed, it wouldn't have the same emotion because we're not really into toys in the same way. But we have to remember that feelings for different ages are very valid, and they are as intense as they tend to show us. So we have to remember, like, it is about my assessment and what I'm bringing to the table about how I feel about it. We also have to remember that the duration of the feeling has a physical impact. So if I'm holding on to stress, if I'm holding on to anger for a very long time, it will have a physical impact on my body. And those feelings are connected to the way that I interact with my world. And so that's really important as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about micro expressions and kind of what your kids are picking up on when they say things about, I think that there's more going on to a conversation. We'll talk about that in just a second as well. But this is what tells us whether we're going to avoid conversation or we're going to approach a conversation where we're going to do the fight, flight, or freeze type of thing when we get into conflict. So all these things about emotions are very important.
All right. This is one of my favorite representations of behaviors, feelings, and thinking, and how it's all connected. And I often, when giving presentations to teachers and faculty, talk about behavior, because behavior is what we see. But behavior is a child's communication to all the things underneath the tip of the iceberg. So these are the variety of feelings that they may be experiencing during a situation, maybe during that flight or flight response when they perceive stress in the classroom or at home. But these feelings are intense, and their duration can vary. And with those feelings are also they're connected to our thoughts or our self-talk. So in positive situations, we have self-talk like, I can do this, I've done this before in the past, or I've seen so-and-so do this, therefore I have feelings of confidence, and thus the behavior that we see would be following rules or engaging at work or trying a new task. However, when the negative attitudes exist, the hopelessness or the worry, the self-doubt, those thoughts then become more negatively skewed and bring on these intense feelings, these feelings that maybe they are not as confident, and thus the behavior might reflect that. It may be a child tries to escape a situation by leaving their work area, or maybe it's the opposite, where they're putting their head down because something is just so overly frustrating, and without the tools to be able to communicate those feelings, behavior can be very challenging and frustrating to the person trying to help, and also most definitely to the child. So this is why we focus so heavily on these social emotional key concepts, because we need to make sure our kids have a balance of skills to be able to navigate challenges.
So emotional communication is definitely more complicated than just identifying an emotion and talking about it. We are constantly giving out emotional communication in our tone of voice, in the way that we interact, in our body language. And so all of that is what's being picked up on by our children. And children are really good at picking up on things that adults over time have begun to filter out. And so when children will say things like, she's looking at me funny, or I don't think that she really does like talking with me, or she doesn't seem like she's really into this, or things like that, sometimes, especially as they're going through puberty and into adolescence, all of our children think that everybody's looking at them all the time. So some of that is developmentally appropriate. But sometimes there is something that they're picking up on with the micro expressions of what's happening, of feeling like they're being singled out or feeling like they're being treated differently. And so it is important that we are listening to them and not just saying, oh, you always think that, or you're always doing that. It is important that we're kind of seeing, where is this developmental and where is this something that they might actually be bringing something to the table that they're emotionally picking up on. And so all of this emotional communication is really important. And as we're having these conversations with our children, those conversations will kind of lead us to understand better what it is that they're experiencing, so that we can kind of get a better picture of what might be leading them to be thinking what it is that they're sharing. And so again, having these emotional conversations are really important. And with that, we're going to start talking about building up emotional vocabulary more granularly. And with that, I will turn it over to Lisa.
All right. So to encourage emotional language at home, labeling emotions is key. That helps make feelings more manageable. And then I had recently come up across a statistic saying that there was over 3,000 words to describe feelings. And, I know in our home, maybe we use maybe 10, 12. But, you have the common ones that you're using. You're sad, or you're mad, or you're hangry. That's often one in our house. But just knowing and encouraging the building on those emotional language acquisition and expressing them. So Mary Beth has shared the Komochi's website, and this is a elementary feeling guide. I have these posted in our house, and they have ones with more emotions on it for older children. And it just kind of helps in those moments when you're not quite sure how you're feeling. And this kind of gives, a prompt that there are many ways to feel. Any of them are correct. There's no right or wrong ones. And we can encourage and model this emotional communication by saying, today I feel brave because I'm giving a presentation in front of a large group of parents who are, and or maybe if your child is having a hard time figuring it out, you could say, I notice maybe you look a little shy because you're worried about joining a new classroom, or you can kind of prompt that based on the context of the situation and ask the child, is that how you feel? And maybe that might help encourage the conversation. But I do encourage you to go onto that website because there are some free printables, especially for our younger kids, and it's a really kind of colorful, helpful way for kids to learn that communication to support emotional language at home.
Great. So this is just one way in which we're giving an example that you can start to build a vocabulary with emotions. So this is actually right behind me, and it's actually each list has gotten much longer since we started this, but this is what we have in our house, and you can do whatever works for your house. But we talk about, in our house, we talk about feelings as low energy, low pleasant. We talk about feelings in energy and pleasantness. So low energy, low pleasantness, to high energy, high pleasantness, and then in between being the high energy, low pleasantness, and the low energy, high pleasantness. And basically what we did was we said to our children, which emotions do you think fall into which categories? And then we started listing them out. And then as they come across different emotional words, we add them to the list. We look them up in the dictionary to see what they mean. We add them to the list, and then we try to use them. And some get more used than others. Like I'm seeing right now that jubilant is on the list, and I don't know that we've used that very often. But it just helps them to be aware that there are many words that we can use. And then what we did in our house is that we then put this strategies list on the side. And that has been really helpful. Again, that has also gotten longer. But this way, one of my children really struggles with expressing his emotions. And so this has been really helpful for him because sometimes he cannot bring a word to what it is that he's experiencing. And his behaviors will start to get very intensive and very strong. And I will just turn to him and say, hey, listen, why don't you go and look at the emotional vocabulary wall right now, and just kind of like spend some time there. And he will. He'll come in and he'll kind of, sometimes he's pacing back and forth, sometimes he's jumping about, sometimes he's just sitting calmly, whatever he needs to do, but he'll look at it, and then I won't say a word, but he'll spend the time that he needs in here, and then I'll just come in and say, hey, can you see a strategy that you need right now to shift from wherever it is you are to another place? And so, sometimes he'll just kind of leave the room then and do the strategy that he needs to do. And sometimes he will end up kind of waiting even longer. Sometimes he'll talk about it. So this has been, really helpful in our household to not only build a vocabulary, but to also be a space where the kids kind of feel that they can go and find that word when they otherwise wouldn't know what to call whatever it is that's going on inside of them. So this has been really helpful in our house. And again, you could come up with whatever it is that worked in your household to name your vocabulary words. Okay, and with that, we're now going, so now once you've actually been able to build your vocabulary words, we want to take you through what it would be like to create a family feelings agreement. So one of the things that can be really helpful is to create a sense of safety in the home about how we're going to feel in the home. And so this is something we've done with many families, and we do it in 3 parts. So we talk about how do we want to feel in our family? How do we make those feelings happen? So this is not just that we're all going to be happy all the time. This is actually really thinking about what feelings do we want? What are the priority feelings? And then what is that actually going to look like? So really thinking through what do we see? What do we experience in our house when that is happening? And then what's going to happen if we don't feel these things? And that's really important, because if we're not going to stay true to what we have agreed upon, then it's going to be meaningless. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a couple of activities now so that you can have some basis for how to kind of do this in your family. I have shared with the Parent Resource Center a video on how to do this as well as a template. And my understanding is that they will also be able to share that with you. So there are many resources in how to do this. But to get us started, let's first talk about this. So in the chat, what are the differences between, based on what little you know so far and what I've shared, what do you think the differences are between a family agreement and a house rule? Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you to everybody who's sharing. I love getting feedback. It lets me know you're here. So yeah, so family agreements can be flexible, right? So family agreements are things that will probably change over time. I love that everybody said that. So everybody gets a say in a family agreement. Rules are what I set as the parent. I tell you, these are the rules of my family, and this is what we're going to do. But family agreements are when everybody has equal voice in the process, and everybody gets involved in this. So rules are really about, somebody said, I think the word boundaries, rules are about keeping everybody safe, right? We're not going to play with knives in this house. We're not going to put our hands in electrical sockets. We're going to have rules about when you come home at night. We're going to have rules around technology, right? Those are things about keeping you safe. Those are things about making sure that I'm developing you as a good citizen in our world. Those are, and they're non-negotiable. Those are just the house rules. I can put them up on the refrigerator. I don't even have to make it about mom and dad. Those are just what's going to happen, right? Family agreements are us coming together as a family to really talk about what is a safe emotional home going to be, and how are we going to share in that together as a family, and how is every voice going to be heard? So definitely that's what the biggest difference is. And thank you to everybody who provided some responses in that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually allow you for a few minutes to get into an activity and kind of have a little bit of a feel of what this might be like to do in your own home. So what we're going to ask you to do, we're going to break you into groups of about 4-ish, there might be, give or take, a person or two, 4-ish people, and we're going to ask that you come to your group with 3 feeling words in your head. So if you were to think of what are the 3 feelings that you as a person really think are the most important feelings that you have in your home? You know, whatever those 3 feelings are, bring that to your breakout group. And we really want you to bring that to your breakout group, and then in your breakout group, this breakout group is now going to become your family for the next 5 to 6 minutes. And you're going to share your 3 words, and you're going to go around, and please give your name just to give it a sense of community, but give your name and everybody share out their 3 words. And then as a group, you're going to talk through this. You're going to talk through, you know, was there a word that everybody brought? If everybody brought one word that's the same, then that's probably a word that you all can agree on that you're going to have for your family agreement. And then there are some words that you could kind of group together, and if you can group them together, what is it, you know, is there one word that like kind of sums them up and you can agree on as being your word? And then all these other words that were brought, which ones are you going to decide? And you're going to get it down to 4 to 5 words that you're going to then determine as a group, those are the words that you're going to use for your family feelings agreement. And when you come back, we're going to process through this a little bit. So again, we're going to break into groups. You're going to have 3 words in your head that you're bringing to the group. When you get into your group, you will share your name and those 3 words. And then as a group, you will determine the 4 to 5 priority feeling words for your now group family that will be in your feelings agreement. And you're going to go through that process for 5 to 6 minutes. So with that, are there any questions before we break into the groups as to kind of what we're doing? All right, so Lisa and I are both going to be here in the main room, and you can still use the main room, the everyone chat, to chat with us. If you need any help at all, we will be here. But if not, then what we will do is we will go ahead and we will break into the breakouts. We will let you go through this process of coming up with your 4 to 5 words, and we will come back. We will come back at 10:40.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to break you into your groups in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, great. I think everybody is back in. Wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So in the chat, can you first start by sharing if you were able to come up with some words, what types of words did you come up with? Okay, loved, special, safe, heard and appreciated. Great, thank you. From group 3. Nurtured, valued, content, loved, heard. So we're seeing some definite similarities. Devoted, loved, grateful, respected, calm, warm, kind, happy, together, appreciated, supported. Great, thank you for sharing these wonderful words. And you can see it, and this often happens, that there's a lot of similarity. So what was the process like? Was it easy? It took a while to kind of come up with what the words were? In the chat, let me know kind of what was your process like? Okay, so one group had 2 people. And there was discussion. Okay. So thanks for, okay, one group says it was pretty easy. Okay, one group found like everybody kind of was on the same page. Didn't feel rushed. All right, so some have very similar things. Okay, so it sounds like the groups were small and it was pretty amenable. So we see a range when we talk about kind of what that process is typically. We see all the way from some people are like, oh, we all kind of had similar words right from the beginning, to, wow, we all brought 3 very different words and it became quite a discussion. And in 5 to 6 minutes, we didn't even get started on trying to find similar words. And the reason I bring that up is because that's typical of families, right? So we have some families that this is a process that might take, 30 minutes and they're done. And we have other families that really have to sit on this for a few days and they really have to kind of talk through this. And so I bring that up to say that whatever your process is, it's normal. So it's okay if it's not something that you can do really quickly. And it shouldn't be something that you can do really quickly if there's not everybody coming to the table with the same words. Because this is a really thoughtful process. This is a process about your family. It's a process where we want everybody to have their voice at the table, and we want to really create that safety and that emotional safety. So it's really important that we do spend the time on it. So so this is something that could take a little bit of time. And so when you do bring all the words, we've had to use things like some families have had to use talking sticks where they are a talking piece where each person kind of held something so nobody talked over anybody, and they made sure that kind of everybody was getting equal time. We've had families who had to take the little timer out of a timer piece out of a game board because they needed to make sure that nobody was talking more than another person, because again, we really want all the voices there. We want to make sure everybody's getting equal time. And so this is the process of kind of figuring out the words can take a while, and it is really important that everybody has equal time to kind of figure out what are those words going to be. The next piece, once you do figure out your words, is that they have to be things that we can see. So it can't just be, we're going to be happy and all of us are going to smile all the time. First of all, that's not realistic. You can't smile all the time. Life doesn't come with smiles all the time. But it might be that there's personalities in the household that they don't show their happiness by smiling all the time. So we have to be aware of who are the personalities that we have? What could this look like? And so what is realistic for our family? And so, for example, in our household, we have happiness is that we're going to say a nice word when we see somebody. Calm is that whenever we're starting to get a little elevated, we're going to take a deep breath. We're going to do it together, and we're going to take as many deep breaths as we need to calm down. Respected in our household is first time listening. And encouraged is a word that was chosen in our household, and that was that we're gonna cheer for each other when we have a success, or if we're having a down moment, we're gonna say something that's gonna help each other out. So you really want to make these words mean something and be something that we can see, so we actually know that it's happening. And again, I believe I said this earlier, but when it's not happening, we have to have something written on our charter that says how we're going to address it. So in our household, our agreements say that when we're not seeing this, we're going to address it to the person and say, listen, we have a family agreement, and I feel that the family agreement is not being upheld right now, and I'd like to talk about that. But that might not work in all households. So you might need to say things like, you're going to apologize, you're going to request help, you're going to say, how can I help you? But it's really important that you have that built in, because if we're going to all stop just following the charter, then the charter is not going to mean anything. So those are all important things about the charter. So there's two strategies that we've given so far. Is build the vocabulary, and here's how you can kind of create that emotional safety at home. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa for some additional strategies.
Great, thank you, Jeanne, and thank you, participants. I really enjoyed seeing the similar yet different values for those family agreements. And as I was reflecting on this presentation, I was thinking it is quite timely, mostly because we are kind of constantly adjusting, and with the reopening of schools, we have new structure, new routines. We're learning to balance virtual learning. So really kind of coming together and making sure we all feel, valued and respected. And also when we're doing those rules and those agreements, saying what it is, what it looks like, how it looks to respect each other, and also giving examples of what it doesn't look like, so that, it becomes even more concrete, especially for our younger kids. Older kids can catch on to that a little that better, but just giving those concrete examples are great. So one of the things wanted to talk about more is self-regulation and what it means to, kind of like be in that optimal zone. Sometimes we talk about this as the window of tolerance. So if you would imagine a window, as I'm looking right at one right now, on Monday morning, it's wide open, you have your coffee, you're ready to go, you can handle the emails and, all the work demands that are kind of heading your way. And then, by Wednesday, maybe that window is, halfway closed. And then by Friday, I mean, you've got a little space looking out, but your window of being able to handle more being put on your plate can sometimes close. And that's kind of like a good visual for how our kids also feel when they have that perceived stress. So when that window is open and the sunshine's coming through, or you can smell the breeze, this is where growth happens. This is where we can take feedback. Like, okay, I got this math problem wrong. Let me redo it. Or I'm focused and I'm able to follow a routine without 30 prompts from a parent or someone, looking over your shoulder, making sure you're doing everything. And you're also able to problem solve, knowing when to ask for help, knowing when you need to take a break, knowing when to access those strategies like Jeanne has right behind her, that, maybe I'm stuck, so, I know where to go. But when we get out of that zone, which is okay, it happens to all of us. When we get dysregulated or hyper regulated, this is kind of our fight response, where we might be angry or frustrated or yelling. Physically, you might be very upset. You'd be crying or red-faced. And we experience that physical distress, like increased heart rate or breathing changes, sweating, those kinds of experiences. And our problem-solving window is much narrower. And on the other side, when you're hypo-regulated, you can kind of zone out. You might have your head down. You might want to kind of disappear into your room for a little bit. Or perhaps you're frozen and you don't know what strategy to use. Basically, the body just kind of shuts down because the situation's very stressful and overwhelming. So we want to work on strategies that we have the overall agreement. We understand how we should respect and interact with each other. We know our family values. Sometimes we get off of that, and that's okay. And what strategies can we use to help that growth continue to happen for our kids and also for adults? One of the things you can do is to focus on what you can control, which a lot of times these days, there's a lot of things outside of our control. Like, what does Costco have? Do they have our toilet paper? Do they have our cleaning supplies? What's the news going to say? How are others reacting? There is a lot of environmental stress around us. So it's kind of checking in on what we can control. We can control whether we, follow the rules in our house. We can control how much media or news exposure we have in our house. We can control having a positive attitude as often as we can. Doing healthy habits or getting to bed on time, making sure we're setting up a work environment that is helpful for ourselves, and even setting boundaries of, yes, we can definitely share. Well, the whole presentation, I believe, will be shared. But setting boundaries, because when many of us are working from home, it's easy to do emails all day, even in your evening hours when normally you would have maybe left work and you're still kind of accessible. So just making sure you set limits for yourself, and also letting your kids have limits as well. So boundaries are very important. And then also self-care. Self-care is such an important thing, and it's something you can control. something you can make sure you put into your routine so you have a few minutes to yourself. Whether it's checking out in your room for a few minutes while everyone's safe doing something else, just taking a little time so that you can be in your optimal zone. All right, so when we look at self-regulation, this is just the process for children and adults when you're faced with a situation. How do you kind of put some control over your feeling responses and your actions given that situation? And for our younger kids, it starts with co-regulation. It starts with adults modeling how to problem solve, adults being predictable, adults creating routines. And then with modeling and practice and feedback, that co-regulation that they're seeking from us develops into levels of self-regulation where they're able to do these things independently. And it's a continual growth. It's not just when they turn 12, they're able to do it. I mean, when they're 22, they still might be asking you for some help for how to handle a situation, or 32, or, there's always those opportunities to learn and grow, but those self-regulation skills become more independent. Having routines for bedtime, playtime, screen time, mealtime. The picture on this is one of the strategies we used because meal planning became overwhelming at one point because, we used to just get lunch at school, but now we're, feeding lunch for, luckily I have a small family, but 3 people for lunch, 3 people for breakfast, 3 people for dinner, and trying to figure out how do we meal plan, how do we kind of make things more manageable. And that was just one of the easy ways. But thinking about moving ahead, we've had some little ones back in the school starting this week. So there'll be virtual days, there'll be in-person days, or perhaps just all virtual days. But knowing there are clear routines can help relieve the stress for the entire family. And then, just also making sure you have designated places for work and play so that so that where those boundaries are in your house. All right, and Jeanne will take us through a few reminders here with the family focus.
So Lisa, it looks like Jeanne got bumped off. Can you go ahead and move forward?
Yes, absolutely. So like I was saying, with those self-regulation techniques, you always want to bring it back to what are our goals and what are our values. Sometimes we can get a little off course, and that's absolutely natural because our lives are moving quickly and we're forced to handle new changes. And it's all about, do our actions and our connections link back to these goals? So if you have that tangible family agreement, that's an easy way to revisit it, because they're not just because you create one when your kids are young doesn't mean it's going to reflect those same goals. They might need to be tweaked to adjust to situations or as kids mature. And really just showing and modeling how to show respect to all family members, and checking in that we are valuing maybe whatever stress may be experienced. So channel your best self with a parent check-in. It's okay to be frustrated. It happens. Often like to use scales. They're just an easy kind of concrete way of identifying how you're feeling. A 1 through 5. If it's a 1, I'm calm and cool, I can handle it. And if I'm a 5, maybe we can address this in a few minutes because I don't think I'm going to give you my best self or the best reaction. And your feelings are valid too, and it's okay to be upset. It's just we don't want to address an issue when we are in that heat of the moment. I mean, unless it's an emergency, you can take a moment and step back. One of my, we're lucky enough to have supervision with a group of other psychologists maybe twice a month. And one of the words from a supervisor when all of this started and all of a sudden we were working from home, which was something I never envisioned, was to just grant yourself some grace, that it's a learning process, it's not easy, and we're all trying to balance things that, didn't really come with a plan or a backup plan. So this is hard, and we're all experiencing some level of frustration at certain times. So just check in with yourself, give yourself a little grace, and know that tone of voice, body language, and proximity also convey feelings to those around us and not just our words. So we really need a full body scan, maybe a connect to the present for a second and then come back and address whatever the issue is, to kind of help refocus back to the rules, or the agreements that you have within your household. I like this graphic. It's 8 ways to help with stress. There's no right or wrong there. I mean, you might have your own personal methods, but just acknowledging and showing your child that you are safe. We're safe to talk about our feelings. We can communicate them. It's okay to be nervous. Let's go for a walk. Our dogs are very lucky right now. They've had plenty of walks, because when we need a break from the house or a frustration check, we go for a walk. Using creativity is a great outlet, and just being connected with each other and just saying we're here for you. So whether you need to talk or a hug, there are ways to be able to connect with our families and just acknowledge that this is hard, but it's manageable. We can do this together. I had mentioned the scale. So this is 2 parts. So you can use a thermometer, you can use numbers, you can use 1 through 10, 1 through 5. You can use colors. They use colors and zones of regulation, a program that's used in some schools. Whatever works for you, but being able to identify those levels. So at the low, that's where you want to start. Where are you calm and cool? Maybe describe it. What does it look like? Where is your optimal place to be calm and cool? Is it, relaxing on the couch or thinking about being on the beach? Whatever that calm, that baseline is. And then kind of moving up the scale. Middle level is like kind of uneasy, and then the highest is your optimal level of frustration or anger. You just feel out of control. So it's okay to be anywhere in there. It's just making sure then the next part would be to have coping tools that match the feelings that you're having, the different levels of feeling. So not every response is that I feel out of control, because sometimes our kids can say, well, I'm either okay or I'm over the top. So it's kind of that all or nothing, black or white, where there is a full gradient. And sometimes I'm just upset right now, or I'm just kind of anxious or worried about what's happening. So a lower level coping skill might be just if I'm calm and I'm given something challenging, just some positive self-talk, like I could do this, or just something positive that I'm good at math, so I can try this. Maybe if you're feeling a little upset, something very simple, just counting to 10 slowly, so that you're controlling your breathing a little bit, and then you're back able to kind of regroup. Or at the top, knowing how to ask for help. And when you're feeling like you're out of control, how do you ask for help? Because when you're very elevated, those words might not be available. So do you have a sign? Do you have somewhere where you go where others can kind of read what you might need? And it's important to come up with these skills and practice those when you're at that calm level. So when we do have those experiences where we move up the scale, a child knows how to kind of access this, and maybe after a few minutes they're able to use some of those coping skills. Calming routines are also helpful, and not just for when a child is at the top of the scale. Calming routines are helpful for, right before they're going to log on to school, just making sure that they have the right mindset. Or even bedtime, creating your own bedtime calm down routine. So we're disconnected from screen time or other stimulation. So we're kind of calm and we're cool and we're ready to transition. And these are very quick practices. The one on the left would be for a younger kid, where you might add visuals for whatever few strategies that you pick. So for this one, it's just sitting still, closing your eyes, taking a few deep breaths, and then getting back to work. Can also make them and kind of post them. I have some of these strategies for my own child near her learning center. So if she just needs a little reminder, or if we're transitioning maybe from lunch back into virtual learning, we can do this and then move on, and be ready to do work. For older kids, mindfulness techniques like grounding is a really helpful way to just quickly connect to the present. So you can close your eyes. You could just take a few deep breaths, and then connect to your surroundings. So name 5 things that you see. I'm seeing my papers and my water, or my phone and a pen. 4 things that you hear. You kind of listening to the ambient noise around you. Things that you might smell. 2 things that you taste, and 1 positive intention or positive self-talk. And you can create this to meet the needs of however your child would like to do that. It doesn't have to be this way. It's just using your senses to kind of connect with the present, clear the mind, and then go back to the task at hand. And when all else fails, call grandma or aunt or uncle or a friend or your neighbor. Just reach out. Connection has been so key right now, with being distance from our friends, our normal groups. Some kids are able to do some sports and activities, while others have not been able to for a variety of factors. It's been difficult in our family. We have not seen grandparents in a long time. So one of the things that my dad started doing was writing little handwritten goofy notes to my daughter and mailing them. So they've been practicing writing, and now she knows what a pen pal is and how to address an envelope, and they look forward to that correspondence. We also made a pie using like FaceTime, and grandma showed us how to put all the ingredients together, and I supervised while she did that. So we're still trying to connect with others, and then just making sure that we schedule that social time, whether it's in person, outside, or whatever your limitations are, or rules are with that, or virtual check-ins, so that we still know that our friends are there and we're connected. It's so important right now. And just even at mealtime, making it an intention to talk about what we're grateful for, even if it's just one thing. Saying one thing nice about each other could just be enough to kind of support that, that positivity, and that, it's okay and we're here together. Several months ago, when I was visiting a friend's house, I noticed this tiny little jar on their counter. I was like, what a great idea. So simple. But this kind of reflects on that gratitude of celebrating your family's strengths and victories. Like, how many new little skills have your kids learned from being at home? How many technology skills have our kids learned from being at home? What skills have our parents learned of DIY projects or just little things, daily things that have gone on that you're proud of. Write them down, put them in a jar, and in 3 months, open that jar up and kind of read those out loud and kind of acknowledge everyone's efforts. It's very easy, but it's a good way of just taking a moment to recognize how far we've come, and kind of reflect on things that maybe you would have normally overlooked. So just, making time to celebrate good things, even if they're not just like major milestones. The little things count too.
Great. So in final summary of what we've been talking about today, basically, it's all important that we're aware of our own emotional responses and our own ability of how we're expressing our emotions. So we're self-aware, we're socially aware, we're aware of our decisions that we're making around our own emotions and our own social reactions, and that we're helping to promote the feelings in the household through a vocabulary and creating emotional safety. And that, we're aware of how to build those strategies both in ourselves and our children, and that we're modeling that mistakes can be made and that we apologize and can be vulnerable together. And I think everybody kind of shared those sentiments today, and I so greatly appreciate the sharing that has happened today of other people's ideas and thoughts and strategies as well, because it is, what works for your family and how, this can best suit you and your growth as well as your family's growth. So all of that together, we do know that when we create a socially and emotionally healthy environment for our children and ourselves, that it allows us to be more resilient, to have better communication and build good conflict management skills in our home. It allows our children to become their own advocates and have the best coping strategies possible. And we build better partnerships with our kids, because in adulthood, we know that it transforms from being a parent to a child to more of a partnership. And that's ultimately what we want to see happen. So with that, at this point, we definitely want to say thank you so much for your time and open it up for, we know there's a ton of great questions that were coming in the chat while we were talking. And so we'd want to take time to address those and also address any new questions that you might have. One thing that we wanted to bring up was one thing that Lisa and I were trying to do was kind of get through all the programming that Fairfax offers, because it's such a wealth of great programming that Fairfax does offer. Komochis, zones were mentioned, and then ruler is another thing that is mentioned. And so I have seen in the chat a lot of references to Mark Brackett. Mark Brackett he's at the Center for Emotional Intelligence. He's the one who came up with the quote, "You've got to name it to tame it." And the Center for Emotional Intelligence is at Yale University, and we also have used some of the ruler work in this presentation as well. And I saw somebody also had mentioned one of the books that he has written. So just to kind of give information about that as well, to kind of ground that that's been going on in the chat. So with that, what other questions might you have?
So Jeanne and Lisa, I have a few questions that we've taken out of the chat from earlier. So let me start with one. How can we support or help a child who has some executive function skills and seems to lack some of these skills, or has a personality that doesn't seem to foster these skills? If someone is hardwired differently, can we really change that?
Okay, yes, I was taking notes earlier in the presentation when I saw that question. So one of the thoughts that came to mind, and these are just ideas, it's not going to fix, it's a process. But for our kids that have executive function difficulties, sometimes following multiple step things, keeping that in their memory can be challenging. So one of the things would be to, just like you might write down a routine for going to bed or preparing for school, making sure you have X, Y, and Z ready to go, you also might want to have a problem-solving example. Like, if I have a problem, what are the strategies that I could do? What are the choices I could make? and practicing it with them. So give them a situation. So if I solve the problem one way, what would be the consequences of that? So the consequences could be, if the consequences could be positive or negative. So kind of having that step-by-step plan written out, so how to make the best choice might be a helpful reminder when they're having difficulties problem solving, and then also keeping that with maybe that emotional vocabulary list and the coping strategies list could be very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So our next question, how best to deal with a very sensitive child who has a hard time expressing their feelings, age 8, and the child tends to get very upset instead?
Great question. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
One would be, I would reach out to your child's school, because there are a variety of programs that are available, because sometimes, generally kids kind of absorb social emotional skills through their surroundings and being exposed to, how parents model at home, and instruction in the classroom. Sometimes they need that direct skill building opportunity kind of in that small group. So I would encourage you to contact maybe your school counselor or your child's teacher to see what is available. So Rachel in the chat had mentioned skill streaming, and that is one of those kind of programs that some schools have available to them. They might have a Komochi's group. They might have a particular group, but whatever the group is, the concept would be to build those kind of regulation or expression abilities, that self-awareness or self-management abilities.
And I would just add also that, sometimes our students might not have a way of communicating verbally, but they might be able to communicate through drawing or through, other media. And so, maybe they've associated a color with certain feelings, or they've been able to kind of draw what they're feeling. So, at that young of an age, sometimes drawing can be a really playful way to also get out what they're feeling. So it might be that could be a place to start too, when they're able to calm down a little bit. When you're talking about a really sensitive student too, sometimes their perceptions of what's happening around them can be not quite exactly what is happening, and the perception might be a little over exaggerated. So you could also talk to them kind of around more of some of those empathy things, about really trying to talk about like what is it that they're experiencing, and try to understand like what do you think that the other person was intending, what do you think was happening on the other side. So just try to start, not to say that one side was right or wrong or any of those types of things, because we don't want to get into that, but just to start to kind of understand where was the different types of thinking, where's the empathy, because that sensitivity is very real, and so they're going to be taking things on a lot. I have one child in my house who's very sensitive, and we actually talk about stinking thinking in our house, and we talk about a stinking thinking in his brain. And so what stinking thinking members get really agitated when he starts to get really sensitive about things. So he's got like Cyclone Sam, who starts to think that everybody's thinking the worst of him, and he's got Silly Sally, who starts to make fun of him. So we really try to like talk about what are those little feeling people in his brain that really kind of might take it to a level that makes it more into a stinking thinking committee in his brain than maybe what's really happening outside. So those can be some techniques that are really helpful. But again, if verbalizing it is hard, it could be safer to draw or maybe even act it out or something like that.
Jeanne, thank you. So we have another question. Do you all have any resources for older children who are feeling depressed?
Not knowing the variables around your situation, I would reach out to your school team and also start maybe with the pediatrician to have that conversation about what might be going on. It could be connected just to, current life situation, but definitely seeking maybe how the school could also support and maybe increase, motivation or connection, because that could be a key component. But I would also look at the medical side of that as well, just so we're making sure that the child is fully supported and that you're supported as a parent, because that can be very stressful.
No, thanks, Lisa.
And
I'm sorry, Jeanne.
And you might want to also just start to focus strategies on depression if you've been able to figure out that that is the specific area where the child is struggling.
So our next question, what to do when your child says, "You seem angry all the time. I feel angry when I've asked her to do something repeatedly and she doesn't do it, and that's why I'm angry by the time she sees me."
I can 100% relate to that. If you have things maybe outlined, that could take away, so you could, here's the list, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and then that removes you from having to give that verbal output every time, so that, by the fourth time you say it, yeah, you're going to be irritated. And then the child's only picking up that irritated. They didn't hear you those 4 times before then, or they weren't, actively listening. Jeanne, do you have any?
I completely agree with you that it's always better if you can kind of take the person out of it and make it about what needs to happen. However, I do think that our children give us feedback about ourselves sometimes that we might need to reflect on. And so as hard as it might be to sometimes hear what our children are telling us about ourselves, I would also, it might be a good thing to sit down and kind of talk about. That's a good place to build some empathy, right? So, to be able to say, well, I am angry. I'm angry that I'm having to ask multiple times. And then this anger doesn't help our relationship. And so that can be a powerful tool to kind of use. But, and then eventually get to the conversation of like, so now we're going to put this on a piece of paper so that we're taking the people out of it. But to use the conversation to kind of build your relationship with your daughter in a healthier way could be really powerful.
Do you have any examples of a family agreement? Is that something that we might be able to share with our participants?
Yes, so I have provided to the Parent Resource Center both a video for how it can be done. It's a lengthier video, but it takes you step by step, and a template that will show you examples. I'm also looking, I believe I used to have a guidance document. I'm looking for that as well to see if I can find it, but all of that we will be providing to the Parent Resource Center for you all to have.
Great, thanks, Jeanne. And I do have that you sent me. And we will just to remind everyone, we will be sending a copy of the presentation today. So you've got some of those charts and some of those examples to reflect upon. And I will send the supplemental materials as well, along with once we download our video from today and edit it, we will be providing that link to you all as well, which will be on our YouTube channel. All right, any other questions from the group? All right, so on the issue of frustration, with kids not hearing when you ask for chores, etc., what would you also want them to feel a sense of ownership so they can understand and listen, and how might you do that? So
definitely agree that, we in our household, we talk about Team Veraska, right? So this is not, it's not about earning money. It's not about, it's not about singling anybody out. It's not about making anybody have a horrible day that you had to do a chore. It's about, we are a team, and a team is about doing both the have-tos and the want-tos. and that we have to do our have-tos before we can do our want-tos. And if one person is having to do all the have-tos, then it's not, then how is that fun for everybody? So like, and what does that feel like for if one person is left to do all the have-tos for everybody else? And how does that impact our ability to do want-tos together as a family if one person is having to do a couple hours of have-tos when the whole team Veraska could probably get the same thing done in 30 minutes or an hour? So we really talk about it in those terms of being a team and what does a team do. And both of my children have had the opportunity to be on team sports, so we are able to make those parallels to team sports. Like, you wouldn't not have a goalie and still expect the team to have a chance and not, the other team not score a point. So we kind of make those parallels so that they can kind of understand why it is that we're a team and how we work together. And it doesn't mean that we don't have our moments, but it is really important that they understand what their role in that team is and how they can take ownership. And our children also then are growing up to understand that there are have-tos and there are want-tos in life, and we have to balance that. I hope that helps in answering their question.
No, I think so. So I want to thank Lisa and Jeanne today. This has been wonderful. We really appreciate your time. I know our families have gotten a lot of really great strategies and things that I know that they want to try with their families. Thank you everyone for participating today. We so appreciate you being here with us, and we hope that you all have a really good weekend and stay safe, and let the PRC know if you need any other supports or resources around this topic or any other topics that you might need. Thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day.